Hello folks, my name is Mark and this is Why I Hate the World. How you guys doing? This is a video about Gary Johnson, and specifically why I'm not voting for Gary Johnson. Because I've noticed that a lot of Bernie supporters have seemed to have moved over to Gary Johnson's camp because they agree with his stance on his anti-war stance and his stance on legalizing marijuana and a couple of other things. You know, and that's nifty and everything. The thing is that Gary Johnson, practically everything else this guy believes in is like the exact opposite of what you would think a progressive would believe. So just to start off, for example, he supports trade agreements like the TPP, right? You know, the Trans-Pacific Partnership or whatever, which is basically like NAFTA for the Far East. And you know, it helps, it allows corporations to ship out jobs and race towards the bottom and cut wages and all this other baloney, you know. He supports fracking. He opposes anything that would make college affordable. You know, that was one thing that Bernie Sanders got. He actually got Hillary Clinton to endorse that, you know, paying for, you know, reducing student loan debt, things like that. You know, he's against all of that shit, right? He has an abysmal record when it comes to environmental policies. Like, he basically wants no federal controls on the environment at all. Like, he thinks, you know, he takes the classic libertarian stance that you can just, you know, use the courts to keep corporations from poisoning people, which is just bullshit. You know, basically that means that, like, let's say, you know, the paper mill down the street is poisoning your water. You have to actually sue them in order to get them to stop, but of course they have to, like, you have to prove damages first. So do you have to wait until somebody gets cancer before you can sue? Or, you know, and then if you do decide it's you up against them and they're, you know, they have like way more resources and can hire, you know, lawyers for millions of dollars, you know, that's what he believes. That's what he thinks will stop, you know, corporations from polluting, which is bullshit. He supports a balanced budget amendment, right, that would cut federal spending by roughly 43%. And the only way to do that is to, of course, cut entitlements like Social Security and Medicare and all that stuff, right? So basically, it's like taking the, you know, the burden and putting it onto like poor people. He opposes net neutrality. He wants to increase Social Security, the age to 75, and open it up to privatization, which is a fucking nightmare. Okay, you know, George W. Bush wanted to do that too, if you remember right, back in you know, the early 2000s. He wanted to put Social Security into the stock market. You know, and then the stock market tanks, right? Like, it crashes as bad as it's like, you know, it was like the worst crash since like the fucking 1929 crash. So, I mean, aren't you glad that we didn't do that? Because we wouldn't have Social Security now if we would have done that. If we would have followed this policy, it would be gone now, you know. But that's what this guy wants. He has, you know, he has zero support for any kind of gun control whatsoever, no background checks, no smart guns, no nothing like that. No maternity leave, no paid medical leave. So you have a baby right now, even, you know, even Donald Trump has come out and, you know, has been shamed into giving us like a really shitty proposal on, you know, maternity leave. Like, his proposal on maternity leave is fucking pathetic. Hillary Clinton's is actually much better. You know, hers includes leave for you know, same-sex couples and for the father and stuff like that. You know, Gary Johnson, none of that shit. Gary Johnson thinks that climate change, man-made climate change, is a hoax. He doesn't believe that, you know, that the actions of human beings like pollution and carbon emissions have anything to do with it. And thus he opposes any government action at all to address that. He wants to cut the corporate tax rate to 0. Okay, now as it is right now, corporations get away with, in many cases, right, paying 0% taxes. So And that's pretty much universally derided by anybody with a brain as a bad thing, you know. They're doing things like they're moving money out into like the, you know, Cayman Islands and stuff like that, and incorporating themselves into countries that have, you know, low tax rates like Ireland and shit, so they can get around paying taxes. He just wants to make it legal. Say, fuck it, 0% tax rate. Right, so basically that shifts the burden even more onto poor people. What the fuck else? He doesn't want to, he basically wants to reduce our financial regulations that we have. You know, like, so after, you know, the whole financial industry collapsed because we got rid of Glass-Steagall in the 90s thanks to, you know, the Republicans, right? They ditched Glass-Steagall, and then, you know, that caused the fucking entire financial industry to just implode and create like the largest, you know, economic downturn since the Great Depression that we're still in some ways recovering from. You know, we managed to get a little bit of regulations in there. You know, banks have to hold a certain percentage in cash versus, you know, the derivatives and stuff like that. He wants to remove even that. You know, even the teeny weeny bit of regulation that we have, he wants to get rid of all of that shit so that we can just go through these giant boom and bust cycles, you know. Let's see. He wants to remove the Fed's mandate to maximize employment, and he wants to return to the gold standard, you know, which will fuck the economy way up, because that's basically like, you know, he wants to run the economy like it was back in the fucking 18th century and shit. He wants to block grant Medicare and turn it over to the states, right? Yeah, good luck with that. And he wants to eliminate the income tax, the payroll tax, and the estate tax, and he would replace it with a 28% fair tax, right? That exempts the poor. You know, so that's basically raising the, what that would do is that would raise the sales tax to roughly 40%, right? And it would not exempt the poor, okay? It basically, in real life, that pushes the burden onto the poor, away from the rich people. So, and this is just, you know, some of the shit I found. I mean, basically, these are all like classic libertarian stances, you know, and all it really is to like get all the taxes away from the rich people and put them all onto the poor people, because that's really what the Libertarian Party is all about. That's how it was founded, you know. They another thing is that he wants to remove well, I don't know about Gary Johnson, but one of the official stances of the Libertarian Party is to remove all public education, like completely. Just get rid of all public education. Like the responsibility for educating your child relies on falls on you, specifically you, and it's a fucking joke. I mean, so I don't really see how anybody who would support, you know, somebody like Bernie Sanders, who is the exact opposite of all of this shit. Bernie Sanders wants to raise taxes on rich people, right? He wants to like get rid of college debt. In fact, he wants to make college free for people, like it is in fucking Northern Europe, right? Based on merit. He wants to fucking, you know, regulate the banking industry so that we don't have like these, you know, giant bubbles that burst and destroy the entire fucking economy, right? And it's like, okay, you know, it's nice that, you know, Gary Johnson's stances on war and legalizing drugs line up with yours, but think about all the rest of the shit too, all right? Because I don't think you'd be having a really good time when President Johnson fucking, like, you know, just fucks everything up. So I think people just, you know, they vote for one issue, and that's what's really going on. Is they're looking at it and they're going, oh, this guy wants to legalize weed, all right, and he wants to like get rid of the war, let's vote for him. And it's like, no, man, there's more to it than that. Okay, please, if you're thinking about voting Libertarian, just read a little bit about what they stand for and what Gary Johnson specifically stands for. You know, one other thing that this guy Gary Johnson, he supports private prisons. Okay, you know, we just, like, a few weeks ago, I read a thing where the federal government is going to stop using private prisons, right? And it's because they lead to, like, untold levels of corruption where people get thrown in jail for the smallest infractions because they make money off of it, right? It's like, you know, just read about these things before you decide to just follow a guy because he agrees with you on, like, two things, all right? I mean, Gary Johnson, I think, in my opinion, would fuck this country up just as much as Donald Trump would. So, anyway, that's why I'm not voting for this guy. Adios.